Give a big AwakeCon welcome to Maria Wheatley.
Hi, well, for those that don't know me, my name's Maria Wheatley, and Tom Ben rather gave a really good introduction. I lead tours to ancient sites, from Malta to Stonehenge to Ireland, and I also have been studying things like astrology and tarot. So I'm going to give, with this talk, a kind of guided tour of some of the ancient sites associated to two very important global ley lines that were recognized in the ancient Egyptian times. And we're not just going to stay with the sacred sites we know quite well, like Stonehenge. We're going to go down deep into the earth, and we're going to underground ancient sites as well. But to kick off, we all know about Stonehenge, don't we? Well, we think we know a lot about Stonehenge, but there's a lot to discover at these sites. And we're going to have a look at the earth energies and the leys associated to them and the people that built them as well. Because we all think we know this site. Because back in the 60s, Richard Atkinson, he wrote a book called Stonehenge. And there was a great photographer working for the publishing house that said, I know, we think that the midsummer sun is in alignment to the heel stone. It isn't, as I'll show you. But if we manipulate the shot, we can put that on the front cover, then everyone will think it's aligned to the midsummer sun. Any archaeoastronomer would tell you that's a very weak alignment. That's what they did. They manipulated a shot, and from the 60s onwards, everybody said, yes, it's aligned to the midsummer sun. But you see, Stonehenge is built in different phases. It was built in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. That iconic image we're familiar with is Stonehenge phase 2. Now, the archaeological model is it was all about the ancestors. It's all about death. And that's because from the 1930s right up to what's called the Riverside Project with Professor Michael Parker Pearson, they found some ashes in what's called the Aubrey Holes, which is a big ring surrounding Stonehenge. So that was it. They had a little bit of evidence. And bear in mind what they didn't make to the public. They were all women's ashes. Stonehenge phase 1, as we'll see, was dedicated to the goddess, and it was women that were buried there. But that wasn't the scientific fact why they keep brainwashing and drip feeding us that these monuments are all about death and the ancestors. And this is an absolute fact. Parker Pearson started to talk about the ancestors because his mate from Madagascar said in Madagascar, we put up tombs of, like tombstones of massive megaliths, and that's why. So our ancestors did that in Madagascar, so we do it in Stonehenge. It's because his mate said so. It has no reasoning. But people flock there by the thousands to go to see the sunrise at Stonehenge. And this was one time when I was with my family and we were having a wonderful time at Stonehenge, and everybody thinks it's about the midsummer sunrise. But this is the quote from Atkinson. The heel stone is the subject of one of the most popular, persistent misconceptions concerning Stonehenge, that it marks the point of the sunrise on Midsummer's Day. It doesn't. Yeah, but thousands of people flock there. So if it doesn't align to the sun, what really does the heel stone align to? We've all heard of the longest day of the year, haven't we? It's midsummer, okay? And one of the longest days is, longest nights rather, is midwinter day, isn't it? When the nights are really dark, yeah? That's what we think. It isn't. There's a much, much darker moonlit night. It's called the day and the night of the high moon. Yeah? It's when known to magicians and druids and witches the most potent day to do magic. And it's also been said in ancient druid lore, it's the time of collective magic, where if you go to the site of the high moon on a particular day in the cycle of the moon, you can switch people on collectively. Yeah, that's the old steeped legends. And when we come to Stonehenge, well, I'm going to show you the moon phases and why it was so important. But we sometimes forget about who built these monuments, because the monuments that they left behind are so dramatic. The pyramids, standing stones, underground sites. But who were the people that built phase one? Who were the people that found every single sacred site across the world prior to the Bronze Age, which is 2500 BC? Who were these people? Now, my own discoveries around the Stonehenge area was they had very, very long skulls, like elongated skulls. And in the middle one, you see that is the skull of a woman. She probably ruled over Stonehenge. She was probably one of the priestesses or a high queen of Stonehenge. And this was her counterpart, a male counterpart in Glastonbury. Then we have Peru and Malta. And this was probably a female from Malta, completely denied by the Maltese Museum, who went out of their way to send in emails all of the round-skulled people and basically saying, no elongated skulls here, Maria. But it was recorded in various different papers. So these were the people. They certainly weren't tall either. They certainly weren't the Nephilim of great stature, because these people were about 5 feet tall. They were quite short, very long skulls. And they chose the centers in the Neolithic of where all other monuments would start to be built. So we owe it to these. And when we kind of look at reconstructions of what did the High Queen or priestess of Stonehenge actually look like, this is a reconstruction of her. And her skull is so close to ancient Egyptian Tutankhamun, King Tut, that they're really very similar. They were probably the royal bloodline during the Neolithic and then later on in the Bronze Age. But these people were master astronomers, master geomancers. They knew about leys and earth energies, and they knew that the height of the moon in its most power would be a collective experience, okay? So this is Stonehenge, phase one. It was a circle of 56 blue stones, okay? So they came from Wales, about 170 miles away. In fact, they're going further afield now to outcrops in Snowdonia. So it could be up to 200 miles away, for example. They brought the stones to Stonehenge and erected this, and it's called Phase 1 Stonehenge. And it's an incredible monument, because the stones of Stonehenge, you see them today and they kind of look kind of green and they look mucky, and they've had 5,000 years, if we're to believe orthodox dating, of weathering. These stones were very beautiful. They were highly polished, so that the blue stones look like the star-spangled sky, highly beautifully polished. And they were probably encoded, because bluestone is a generic term. You get green bluestones, you get pink flecks bluestones. And what was noticed with the number 56, it's a lunar number. Because if you take 3 times the lunar cycle of 18.61 years, yeah, and you add that together, it comes to 55.83. And then, to match the yin and the yang numbering system at Stonehenge, which they did, because it was about balance, wasn't just about the goddess or the god, it was about seeking balance within. So if you take the number of days difference from 3 solar years to 3 lunar years, you have 55.85. Then if you take 5 lunar years, you come to the number 56. Now, every 18 and 19 years, something dramatic happens at Stonehenge. The heel stone, which is an outlier, it lies just outside of the big Sarsen ring. At midnight, the moon, or sometimes even earlier than midnight, but at the high moon, it would have risen directly above the heel stone in alignment to the whole axis line of this monument. And that's what the long-skulled people chose. Master mathematicians. To work out that cycle is really, really difficult, because I discovered something very similar at Avebury, where you had the night of the high moon there. And I had to go to Stephen Bell from Greenwich Observatory and say, is my software right? Am I correct? So they knew this. So that was very important to them, the moon. But why? Is it just a visual event? So I go to Stonehenge. I'm stood in the centre. It's the night of the high moon rising over the Heelstone. Well, that's a wow factor in itself, isn't it? Were they really just looking for a visual? I can tell you they weren't. They knew what was happening to the Earth, and that's why they chose lunar cycles. So we've got the year of the high moon, and it was way back in the 60s that you had two researchers called Hawkins and Hoyle. Hoyle was a cosmologist, and he discovered that if you used marker stones, you could calculate when eclipses were going to occur. Now, he said it in quite a basic form. If you move two stones every 13 days, and if these stones came together, you could predict eclipses. I mean, that's very clumsy. I really don't think our ancient ancestors were moving little stones around Stonehenge. But what I know they were doing is this represented the ecliptic, yeah? And with the coloured, coded stones, you could see quite visually at a glance when eclipses were, coming. Because again, it's a very visual thing, and I'm sure here we've all seen an eclipse, haven't we, of the moon? It's blood red, isn't it? Anyone seen an eclipse? It's dramatic, isn't it? And you see that, and it feels differently, doesn't it? Was anyone around for the total eclipse in England on the line of totality in Cornwall? Yeah, I was as well, and we were doing all experiments at that time to see what was happening to the Earth. But I think our ancient ancestors saw this is the ecliptic belt, and they placed stones at particular angles, and when two stones in opposite directions like this are lined up, they knew, bingo, eclipse was coming. They knew that a blood-red moon was about to rise over the Heelstone at Stonehenge, making it look very, very dramatic. So this is an eclipse over Stonehenge, not over the Heelstone, because it's not in that 18 or 19-year cycle. So what's going on? That's going to a lot of trouble just for a visual event. Our ancient ancestors were fully aware that at different times of the eclipses, different things happen to the Earth, okay? Now, at Stonehenge, you have beneath your feet, obviously you can't see it, a massive reservoir of water, okay? You have this huge reservoir. Then beneath that, if you go down and down and down, 400, 500, 600 feet or more, you come to another reservoir. Now, these two waters are very different. And I coined a phrase, yin water, to differentiate it from rainwater. Because rainwater will fall down from the skies, and don't we know it here, especially yesterday? And then it'll fill up the aquifers, and it'll fill up the underground streams, and we know that that produces underground water. And that's what the water board bores for, okay? And that could have fallen 30,000 years ago in a Jurassic time. That's a particular type of water. That's not the water the ancients were looking for. That's not the water the Rothschilds are drinking. That's the water that we have, okay? Now, at places like Stonehenge, you have these very, very deep aquifers, and the lowest aquifer is water produced independently of rainfall. It's produced by Gaia, yeah, independently. So in rock strata, esoteric water diviners will tell you that this water comes up, and it makes these amazing patterns of a spiral in the middle, called a geospiral over there, a circle of energy, and then a halo of energy, okay? So all ancient cities, for example, why were they a walled city within a circle? They were following this energy pattern. Plato with Atlantis, why was Atlantis a circular city? They were following these ancient codes of what the Earth does beneath us. And you know what? I've been saying that for, 25 years, over half my life. And I've had geologists cackle at me. I've had, oh, yeah. But Just recently, in New Scientist magazine, it came out that yes, the Earth can produce her own water. Now, we've tested the signals of this with engineer David Webb and Rodney Hale, and we know that brings your brain into 7 hertz frequency. When you enter Stonehenge, when you enter Avebury, when you go into a fogu, which I'll be taking you to in a moment, your brain goes into alpha. Yeah, naturally. You don't even have to think about it because it's emitting this energy field. So these ancient sites allow us to come in a very meditative state to possibly even change our consciousness, okay? And if you imagine we have a heartbeat, okay? We wake up when it's, some of us anyway, at dawn, and we go to sleep at night. It's our natural cycle, wake up and sleep. Gaia, Mother Earth, has her natural cycle, and she can slumber sometimes in that cycle, and then she can wake up in her cycle, and she wakes up in her cycle every 18.61 years when the moon, sister moon, is really high in the sky. And at this time, and this time alone, is when the earth energies start to beat out their frequencies. And Stonehenge, for example, was placed on all of these massive aquifer patterns. To our ancients as well, they were so aware of the earth because this outer halo bit there is always been said in esoteric water divining, this is protective, it will protect you. And that's why a lot of ancient city walls are placed in that configuration. In nature, foxes didn't always eat all of the chickens or all of the ducks because what happens is when ducks and certain birds that are vulnerable, they look for the earth energy patterns that can protect themselves. So they would give birth on outer halos, for example. Now, this generates a lot of energy, and then we need what's called carrier lines to take this energy from one site to another. And this is where topographical leys come into being. The whole point about this is living in harmony with the earth. Because it's well known, I mean, the very vibrant last speaker was talking about, medicines and marijuana. Well, that's great. You could have all of the orthodox medicine that you want, yeah? But if you live on what's called underground yang water that I described falling from the sky, you're not going to self-heal. In Germany, 8,000 people from their National Health Service were monitored, and they placed them in a control. They can place them over negative earth energies, and they placed them into categories to see if they could self-heal. Now, some of them were having chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and others were having natural therapies and complementary medicine. And it was found categorically that a third didn't self-heal if they went back to the geopathic stress, the negative earth energies. And I've been involved with American hospitals where we're now laying out the hospital to avoid this type of geopathic stress. It's very important to us because that survey also said this, and it's shocking. A third of all hospital patients from those years' study were in that hospital because of geopathic stress. So we have to switch on to this. You go to a stately home, you go to where Alexander Thyn, Lord Bath lives, for example, the Masons were really, really good at finding positive earth energies. They named them habitation spirals, because there's certain spirals like that help you live longer, okay? They preserve you. So when I did some astrology once for Lord Bath, he's a crazy guy actually. But I was doing some astrology for Sunday dinner entertainment sort of thing, and he said, "I suppose you know about my spirals." They all know about it, and in fact, stately homes, the Masons lay them out perfectly. When you go to a stately home, in their minds, symbolically, you have to be at the center, like a geospiral, the center of your land. The esoteric center is where the genie and the magic resides. So that's when you go down to somebody's stately home, you go down a sweeping drive, don't you, and you arrive at a circle, yeah? It's symbolic. It's symbolic of this pattern. So when we really have a look about the Earth currents, is there any evidence for this? This is a geophys survey done by Ros Cleal at Stonehenge to show you how they were looking for other artifacts, by the way. It shows you the magnetism. It flows through by the heel stone and right through. That's highly powerful magnetic energy that can be harnessed from places like Stonehenge. Now we're going to have a look at carrier lines. And incidentally, that female water that gives off the spiral pattern, the circle, and the horseshoe is the most powerful form of earth energy. Other diviners, such as Hamish Miller, going back to the 1980s, he noticed at ancient sites, you'd have an earth current coming in and suddenly it would turn. It's the spiral pattern that turns it, intimately affected by the moon. So at Stonehenge and places like this, we have these amazing, powerful leys. And on the side there, which shows the British Isles, we have Stonehenge, Avebury, and the Sanctuary. Now, that's a huge energy line that goes all the way through Stonehenge. In fact, our ancients chose Stonehenge for one reason, not just the aquifers. They slightly moved the centre over because Stonehenge is on a remarkable latitude that you don't find anywhere else in the British Isles. It's where the rising midsummer sun sets at an angle to the moon's most northerly moon set. It represents, again, balance of the sun and with the moon. So you have all of these earth energies and water energies beneath the earth. And then you have sometimes these carrier lines. And over here where we see the world, we've got a parallel line going all the way up. And if you, like the ancient astrologers did, if you divide the earth up into 30 degrees by 12, which is what the ecliptic heavens are above for the zodiac, for example, then you have the first point of Aries, and where you have the first point of Taurus, for example, is exactly where the Taurus mountains start. And where you've got the ring of fire, you have Leo. So what the ancients did, they projected the heavens down onto the earth and created this zodiac. And it has been found whenever you have particular planets hitting these angles, like hitting Leo, for example, or Gemini here, earthquakes happen. So it can be an earthquake predictor as well. But we need to visualize these as huge ley lines. And in fact, our Druid ancestors said there's 12 mighty circles that encircle the earth, and they are of power. Own all 12, or at least 4, and you can rule the world. And that was kind of believed by a lot of people. So I've combined it, ancient astrology like this, and you could do this for your house, incidentally. You don't have to do it for the world. You could do it for your house, wherever you live. And that's very, very ancient astrology that was applied. And in the Victorian times, they really liked this form of astrology. But astrology has moved on, and it's moved on to such a degree that it's looking at places like black holes, for example. And modern-day astrologers tend to say these are really powerful points in the cosmological living universe. And I noticed that when you start to look at any major sacred site that has a vortex of energy, be that a geospiral or be that a vortex like in Sedona, it always tends to align above to a black hole. Cannot be coincidental. I really do feel that the long-skulled people that placed these monuments were fully aware of the cosmology of above and so below. So in a way, we could say to have a really powerful power center that can switch you on galactically above, if you combine those two together, bingo, you've got something. Now, I've taken groups of people into Stonehenge. I've taken groups of people into Avebury. And Thomas Sheridan and myself are doing a tour to Ireland where we'll be taking groups of people to Ireland. And I've noticed at some ancient sites, people start to repeat the same experiences all of the time. And it's on those sites where you have a lot of vortex energy. So I feel our ancient ancestors were really looking out for this. And the reason they wanted to know about the eclipses, because something happens at an eclipse And if you've got an energy system or you're switching people on collectively, you have to know when eclipses are. Because eclipses do something to Mother Earth, yeah? They make her go still. Oomph. Everything goes quiet. The birds will dim down. And when I've been involved in experiments since 1999, we have all discovered the same thing, from Hamish Miller, Paul Broadhurst, to myself, and many, many others. You can't find anything. It all goes quiet, yeah? You can't find a ley, you can't find an earth current, you can't find a geospiral. It goes really still. Mother Earth is now in her slumber, yeah? But the thing is, it's a bit like rebooting your computer, yeah? When it goes still or crashes for a while and you do a reboot, it comes up twice as energetic, yeah? So if you can time things before or after an eclipse, at the high moon, for example, you can really raise one's consciousness up quite high. Also, as well, I've taken people into Stonehenge, and there's one stone there. We coined the phrase the spine stone, for example, because it looks like it's got a big spine going down its back. And it was really cold, and I think Basti, who's looking after the books, he was with me, and I had a whole group of people. I was blinking freezing. So I thought, I'll go over to the spine stone and I'll start warming up my hands, because it just emits all of this amazing warm energy. And of course, security, because if you go even in on private access, you having a security guard breathing down your neck, or threatening to throw you out if you even do go near to touching the stones, you're threatened off. Out you go, out you go. So anyway, we were warming up our hands. Security came over and said, "What are you doing? You're too close to the stones." Bearing in mind, your hands are like this, yeah? And what are you doing? Warming up our hands because, we're cold. Really? Snigger, snigger. Oh, give us a go. And they couldn't believe it. They'd been there all that time and they forgot, they didn't know that those stones emit these energies. The reason why you're having this tunnel system at Stonehenge, the reason why is because they will have total control of that ancient site, okay? You will not be able to go into Stonehenge if you don't buy a ticket pretty soon, and they will have complete and utter control. And this is phase one, because recently I've been going to Avebury, like Ben and others, freely. Yeah? You have to pay to go to Avebury. It's the world's largest stone circle. Go there if you've never been there. Who's been to Avebury? Loads of you. It's free, isn't it? You didn't pay to go there, did you? No? There's a village there. But guess what English Heritage are doing now? If you take people there, we want money from you. I want a 3% of all your earnings. You have to get a license. You have to have, insurance. I've got insurance to take people out. And I try to galvanize everybody. This is phase one of your sacred site being taken away from you, okay? And nobody's doing anything. And I think they're clocking the numbers up so they will monetize Avebury within 5 years. And we have to stop that. Because these places will switch you on, they will allow your consciousness to raise, and I think that's what they're very frightened of. So, when I need to call out some help, I hope you're going to be there. Yeah, we're going to stop English Heritage. So that's some kind of earth energies, giving you an idea of Stonehenge and what other ancient sites are like. Now, in the ancients, they spoke of the beautiful library of Alexandria, okay? It was absolutely stunning. You can see different designs in it. It looks like Egyptian. It looks slightly like a mosque. It's wonderful. Now, there was a very ancient astrologer that studied there called Claudius Ptolemy, okay? And he studied there, and he looked into all of the ancient manuscripts on astrology and other sciences as well, like mathematics, and he just decided that there was two very, very powerful lines, yeah? And that these two very powerful lines divided Mother Earth into 4 quadrants. And in these 4 quadrants, they equated to the elements of fire, earth, etc., and water. So that's how they saw the world. And what he did, he took a lot of study in this, and what I did is I've projected these ancient lines onto a modern day version of Google Earth. And this was done by a friend of mine called Hugo. So this is one of their lines that they said this was very important. This is one of the most important lines of the world. It was one of them that divided the north to the south. We use today the equator, don't we, to make the north and the south. In these ancient times, they used this ley, whoosh, and it goes all the way across. But one thing I noticed was one style of monument kept appearing on these lines time after time after time, and it was to utilize underground water and earth energy, and then to use these as carrier lines. So that's the main line, and we need to think of this as kind of like the esoteric equator. It's of great importance. Now that line goes through Gibraltar, good old John Lennon, imagine, peace. And we notice there's a big rock. Here's Tibet. That line went through Tibet, and you have mountain ranges with Tibet. These are really, really holy centers associated with rock, yeah? Now, when we have a look at the ancient way of geomancers from China, looking at the energies of Mother Earth, they would say wherever you have rock, dramatic rock shapes, you have energy passing from like mountain to mountain, rock to rock, yeah? If you go to a really granite place, like, for example, Karnak in Brittany, you go to even Vancouver Island of Canada that's made of granite, you can start to feel the passing of these rocks. And when you have underground water going through rock, any water diviner will tell you it makes a chevron pattern, yeah? It does a zigzag. And that's why throughout the world, the symbol for water is that zigzag pattern. So we have on this kind of esoteric equator all of these amazing places from Tibet to Gibraltar. Now, if you project that over the Atlantic Ocean, then there's a kind of a basin here that's called Canary Basin that, according to Hugo's work, that could have been even Atlantis, because it creates this kind of basin and you have all these anomaly tides. I don't know if that is the case, but he certainly seems to think it's on this line and was of great importance. Now, and that's the Atlantic subgrid there. Now, when we kind of project a lot of leys onto the world, we have these nexus centers where they all gather. Can you see, like here? And obviously this is sort of Stonehenge and Avebury, and that's a ley line I've often discovered that links to the planets, that kind of green line there. And that represents a huge, huge nexus of crossing lines, creating a massive vortex of energy. And then the line will go on. So we need to figure out that there's all of these kind of lines in the living, breathing system of Mother Earth. Well, the line, according to the esoteric astrologers and Claudius Ptolemy, who studied in this wonderful Egyptian library, he said they cross at the esoteric center of the world. And this esoteric center of the world is sacred. You go there, and you go there to learn from the mounds and from, some would say it could have been a pyramid there, but you go there for importance. So even the ancient Egyptians didn't see Egypt as being the esoteric center. They said it could have been the center of the landmass, but they didn't call it the esoteric center. And when we look for the esoteric center, it's Aleppo, where it's been bombed and bombed and bombed and destroyed. This is where the two lines cross. In the ancient world, Aleppo was of vast importance. And some people have said, through remote viewing and through other sources, that within the citadel, which was a white mound originally, there has been artifacts hidden over the years. I mean, whether that is the case or not, I don't know. But most ancient capitals had a white mound, yeah? If you go to Avebury, you had a white mound called Silbury Hill. If you go to London, you had a white mound that the royal family took over and made into a tower, Yeah, to imprison people. In fact, we have an old myth, again, a Druidic myth, whereas White Mound in London, now the Tower, well, it became the Tower in the medieval times, kept the ravens in there. And the ravens were a symbol of the ancient god Bran. It was one of our British gods. I mean, we know a lot about Egyptian gods, Isis and Hathor, but our ancient gods, one of them was Bran, and his symbol was the raven. And when the ravens leave the Tower of London, it's decreed that England shall fall to France. Yeah. So our God was protecting that. In fact, in one myth, he had his head cut off and placed in the mound to forever look over the French Channel. Well, during the Second World War, much to the horror of Winston Churchill, the ravens flew away. So the prophecy of the old ancients could come true. So he made sure that he sent people off to Scotland to get the ravens back and to put in the tower, and that's why they have now rather their wings clipped to stop them flying away. A White Mound is a kind of esoteric center. So London has its esoteric center, and Aleppo has its esoteric center, which were study places of great learning. And even below rather, that huge White Mound, you have wells going down 410 feet. They didn't need to go down that far. Yeah, you don't need to go down that far to get underground water. You only have to go sometimes 200 feet to get what's called an artesian well. An artesian well is where water spouts up. It's very, very pure. But they went down very, very deep to get the purest waters of Mother Earth filtering through. You're on tap water. Most of us here probably, do we own our own wells, anyone here? You're on tap water, you see. We know what the crap that they put into tap water, don't we? From, we're worried about fluorides and all the things to dumb us down. Well, I've only really had one straight job in my life, really, and that was working for the National Health Service, doing my little bit when I was about 19. And I worked for the chemo RT department, and I was really horrified, coming from a family of esoteric water diviners, that they said to all of their patients, well, what you need to do, if you've had RT or chemo, you're becoming highly radioactive, by the way, is when you pee into the toilet, flush the toilet twice. And it will all go away. Yeah? And that's the advice that you're given. But it doesn't go away. Because what does water have? Memory. Yeah? So when you're putting in those poisons, it's going through the system, and that won't be filtered out. Yeah? So anyway, my dearest friend, best friend Basti, he went to hospital in 2006 with a cancer problem. And I said to him, my God, I bet you they haven't changed the old rules. Flush the toilet twice. Because I was campaigning back then to have toilet facilities like a portaloo done by the NHS to place into your house so you don't infect the waters. And I read through Busty's chemo notes, flush the toilet twice. Yeah? So our water is becoming very, very radioactive. Yeah, through all of the different types of drugs, and that's without the fluorides. It is, and full of medicines. It's not good at all. But the deep, deep water can self-heal you. Yeah. Now, there's an old rite when you water divine and you're going for the holy water of Mother Earth. You can only do it on a cloudless day. Yeah, so you have to wait around a lot in England if you're doing that sort of well, boy, and I can assure you. And anyway, so you're waiting around for a cloudless day. And it's quite a nerve-wracking experience because it's about 150k just to get the borer down. And you use this kind of diamond head to go right the way down to get the well. And so that's what you do, you kind of bore it all down, and then all the gump comes off, like the chalk and the earth, and it's a mucky sort of mess around. But then when the water stills and the fresh water comes up, you take a glass of it in water and put it up like to that light there, and that's the sun, and it glints like a diamond. And that water is said to replenish your cells, and that's the water for 100% accuracy, which the Rothschilds drink in Wiltshire, and most of those types of families all have very, very deep wells. Now, when we even come to Aleppo and having a look at that as an ancient power center, that too is aligned to a black hole. So again, I don't think these things are coincidental. I think they all kind of align up to feed the energy system. And you know what as well, I mean, when you come to like the Rothschilds estate and things, they are so located, not just on habitation spirals to make them live longer, but they have a lot of carrier lines as well. And it's really shocking, really, because they're very rich, but they're really tight as well. Their lecky bill was going out of control, on one of their little properties called Pound House. It's all about money and their symbolism. So little old me gets called out to try and solve their lecky problem. And I'm thinking, my God, can't you afford your lecky bill? Anyway, I instantly realised it was on the crossing point of two leys, and you have to slow those leys down. Because, you see, to our ancient ancestors, a straight line, you didn't live on a ley line, no way. The energy travels whoosh, it travels far too fast. And in ancient China, they were so paranoid about the sha qi, as they called it, travelling too fast. They made all of their roofs curvature so that the qi slows down. Well, anyway, the Rothschilds didn't use the chi slowing down. It was zapping through their house. And that's been sorted. And I hope that it happens again, because it wasn't fully resolved. So here we go. We go right the way to Aleppo. That's where the crossing lines cross, creating this amazing power center. And then we start to have a look at where the Legos and other sites it targets. And we go to Peru next, to an ancient site in Peru, and it's the Temple of the Moon that it's called. It's called Huaca de la Luna, and it's, again, one of these huge white mounds, and almost like pushed in the energy. And this was a really, really beautiful place. It's a bit off the beaten track for Peru, but when you start to see the beautiful artwork of these sites, you had the Temple of the Sun there, and you had the Temple of the Moon there, just like at Avebury, just like at Stonehenge. You need the male and the female, and the artwork is phenomenal. It's a very, very beautiful place. And these pyramids, for example, that they were building, and their capitals, which were, again, above these deep waters and earth energies, and this is Chan Chan, it's one of their later capitals, the workmanship that went into these sites was phenomenal. But a lot of people, when they think about Peru, they don't necessarily think about these particular sites of the Temple of the Sun or the Moon there. But they're absolutely incredible. So that's the east-west line, and it goes all the way to Australia. So we're on a mound thing, really, and a pyramid thing. Now, when we go to Australia, we come to the Gympie Pyramid. Now, if you Googled this pyramid in Australia, they would tell you, oh, it was built by the missionaries. There's nothing old about it at all. But a lot of the people that have been doing excavations there with the archaeologists are finding things from Tibet there, really ancient artifacts. So I think that is part of these pyramid sites and mounds placed upon these ley lines, and this is I believe, the evidence for it. Now, when we go north-south through to Aleppo, we go through Lapland, we go through Moscow, and we go through East Africa. Now, not far from Moscow, you have a massive mound, a bit like the Aleppo mound, a bit like Silbury Hill, and our London mound in the city of London. And, make no mistake, Moscow is a power centre. Most cities are a power centre. And even the city of London, which, as probably we know here, is its kind of country in its own right, isn't it? That's the city of London. It's set above these massive amounts of underground water, yeah? And I was called into Chelsea last year because it's been brought up by the Russians, yeah? And the Russians, because it's, Chelsea has... what's it called, and you can't change a house, grade 2 listed buildings and things like that. They're building underground, and they're going down so far underground to build their Olympic-sized swimming pools, they're rocking the water table, and the water table's coming up, and I was sort of called out to see how to resolve these issues. And when we look at the underground energy, especially in the City of London, they have chosen that horseshoe pattern to symbolically protect it. And it's where the term currency comes from, with relating to esoteric water dowsing. So as we kind of go north and south through these global lines, said to mark the esoteric center, there's a lot of caves come into it, as well as the mounds. And then when we go further south, we come across the Meroe pyramids of Sudan. These are amazing pyramids. In fact, there's more pyramids here in the Sudan than there is in ancient Egypt. But when do we hear about these on our kind of TV? We don't, do we? It's like these are, oh, you don't mention them, but they are all sited within one of these lines, and they're all feeding up to Aleppo power center. And the masonry on these are absolutely stunning. So there's a real thick pyramid theme. And when we look close, I mean, the angles of them all are absolutely spectacular. They really are. So we have these ancient sites above ground associated to ley lines, but I'm going to show you the sites beneath the ground now that you can go to. And some of them are absolutely spectacular, because the ancient ancestors didn't just create monuments above the ground. They wanted to go deep, deep into the ground. Has anyone been to a fogu here? A few. It's a good experience, isn't it? I know Thomas has been to irrigates, because I was with Thomas on a TV series with that. But anyway, we're going to have a look at going into caves and going into the earth. Now, has anyone been to Mine How? One person has been to Mine How. Well, you're going to love Mine How. It's on Orkney in Scotland, okay? It's a wonderful island. It's beautiful, and it has this most sacred site, yeah? Due to health and safety, you have to wear one of those hard hats and a little luminous jacket. But if you get your head around that, then you're fine. This is the ground level, okay? Now, you know, like spiral staircases in houses, yeah? You imagine now you're going to go way down 20 feet below ground, but you're going to go round a spiral staircase, yeah? You're walking around in a spiral, and you have little landings each way. And there's 27 steps, which is a lunar number. So this is probably very associated with the moon's cycle. And then you come to, which says on the diagram, the deepest chamber, okay? Then you have to stand on the deepest chamber, and now you have to take a leap of faith, because now you just have to jump into the womb of the earth, because that's a huge drop, okay? So you kind of gather your thoughts up, you ask the god or the goddess or whoever you worship to be with you, and then you jump, yeah? And then you kind of spring down like this, and you come back up. And there's enough room just to kind of put your body against. Now, I've worked with a guy called Tony Robertson before, and Tony Robertson's really left brain. I really like him, actually, and I kind of did a ley line thing with him on one show. But one time on Time Team that he said changed his life was Mine How. Yeah, because the team went in there, and then they said to Tony, we're going to turn off the lights, which they do, because all you've got, you know, like on a plane, which the 3 words you don't want to hear on a plane is brace, brace, brace. But if you do, they light up the little lights, don't they, on a plane, and you're supposed to get out following the lights, you know, as if. But anyway, that's what you've got going down. You've got these kind of little lights going down. He did a jump, and he said that really changed him, because you're in the rock strata now. You feel a part of the womb of Gaia. You feel kind of different. The light is dim. It's almost as well like a sound starts to come into your head, but like a bit of a buzzing noise. Loads of people have said that. And then when you close your eyes, you see flickerings of light. It's a truly astonishing experience. So I say to most of you that haven't been to Mine How, get yourself up to Orkney and definitely go to Mine How. It's entering the earth and becoming one with her in a way. Because to our ancestors, to enter these sites, they would have prepared for them, they would have chosen the right time, the right planetary hour, and they would have gone there with deep, deep reverence and deep respect. And even, in today's climate where you buy your ticket, to go in, you can put yourself to one side and say, I'm going to enter this site and hopefully be changed in some way. Now, this has been dated to the Druidic period of the Iron Age. That's from 750 AD up until the time of the Roman invasion. But I think it goes back much, much earlier, because our archaeologists do a crazy thing. They go to a site like Stonehenge and Mine How, and they will find 2 bits of carbon. Yee-hee, that's the holy grail for the archaeologists, carbon. Well, we can date it now. We can find out what date it is. So they found the 2 bits of carbon, they date it, and our policy is to choose the youngest date. That's how everything is dated. They choose the youngest date. So when Geoffrey Wainwright recently did a dig at Stonehenge, looking into the blue stones and the healing virtue, they call it healing temple, which indeed it is. They found it, and it dated it to way back 7,000 BC, but they chose 250 BC because that's the date everything was built. If you go to the pyramids, if you go to Stonehenge, they love that date. So this is how you'd go down through this kind of like tunnel, cubby hole. You enter it, and you kind of have to go like that. And that's the lights of the kind of brace lights that go down like that. And then you come to this landing, and this is where you kind of drop down to one level, and the masonry is absolutely perfect. Now, when you're in one of these monuments, you cannot hear anything else unless somebody by you speaks. It's a bit like entering the King's Chamber or something. It's free with reverence. And that's the kind of masonry close up. It is truly astonishing. And most of the bricks that were in situ, that means they haven't been altered or rearranged, are standard size. And when you see the odd ones, that's what kind of has been the reconstruction to keep the monument going. Now, another really deep ancient site, this is the one where Thomas Sheridan and I went in, is truly astonishing, because you have to kind of slide into this ancient site, and it's really beautiful. On the other side, you have ancient writing. It's truly stunning, and it's on what we're seeing in a moment. It's called an aquastat, very, very sacred energy. But anyway, you go down there, and it's quite daunting, actually, when you first go into a place like Oinagat, because it's dark, and you have to go down at an angle, and it's damp, and it's quite foreboding, really, at some point. What it was for me to begin with. And then you go down even deeper, deeper, deeper into the earth, and suddenly it is absolutely stunning. It opens up into this amazing space, like you're standing in a cathedral inside the earth herself. And it is an astonishing experience. And when I went in there, I really did feel humbled by the energies of these sites, and felt that something in me maybe have shifted, maybe have changed, maybe have become more receptive. And I felt when I came out a little bit more whole. And at this site, for example, you would have had, originally, is how I see the site, an entrance and an exit. But unfortunately, part of the monument has been destroyed over the course of time, and probably infilled. Farmers used to do that around the Wiltshire area, for example, but this is what remains. So I would suggest to anybody that wants to go to Ireland and wants to experience this, go inside the earth, go to the monuments above, and go to the monuments below, because there is a calling. Now, there's someone said they went to a fogoo in Cornwall here. Did you go to Bowley Fogoo? It's a long... Yeah, it's all good. Well, this is Bowley Fogoo. It's an amazing site, and there's lots of them in Cornwall, for example. And this is granite now. You're in a granite environment. And when you're in a granite environment, it's slightly radioactive. And that can do kind of things to your brain as well, which is all part of the experience. There were some scientists looking into what the effects of granite is in a dolmen, which is like a monument, a bit like the Stonehenge lintels. You have a big capstone and two stones like that, and they're found throughout Cornwall. And they were placed in there at night, and all of them started to have the same experience, where they stared at the capstone, because there's not a lot to look at if you're buying just 3 big stones. So looking attentively at the capstone, and suddenly they said it was like the capstone became alive, the monument started to move, and like you have all the little hallmarks on your thumb, all of the lights started to do like a thumbprint going round and round and round. So these places can change our consciousness, the way we think. And at Bowley, and there's a really nice B&B here. I mean, this can be quite a nice experience. You don't have to dress as a druid and go down and get mucky. You can. That's part of the experience. But there's a B&B by it which has this on private land. So you have to go through the owners to go here anyway. Now, when we have a look at this fog oofer, for example, you go right the way through these massive underground chambers up to 40 feet long. They call them creeps, yeah? And they call them creeps because you literally have to creep along like this. But there was a carving of what's believed to be the healing god on one of the stones as you go in. And this is him there holding up his hand for healing. So this is a huge monument underground, and it's almost quite kind of phallic in shape. So you go into the womb of the god, but it's goddess rather, but it's also phallic shaped as well. And you go right the way down. And the Druids were said to have built these in the Iron Age. That's the kind of official explanation. But I really do feel that they really do predate that, because surrounding all of these sites in Cornwall, you have stone circles, you have standing stones. It's very, very, very rich in archaeology. You have what's called the blind fiddlers nearby. They're these massive phallic-looking standing stones. Then close to that, you have the Merry Maidens, which is, again, a granite monument. It's a stone circle of about 19 standing stones, dressed in rectangular shapes, like it's Stonehenge. Has anyone been to the Merry Maidens? Yeah, you again. You've got a bow, haven't you? Yeah, it's our middle names. Yeah, so around the sites such as the Merry Maidens, for example, you always have the phallic standing stones, then the male and the female in integration. And there was this amazing dowser called Tom Lethbridge. And Tom Lethbridge was the grandfather of long-cord pendulum dowsing. He was an archaeologist, so he came from a very grounded background, and he wanted to explore Devon, and he wanted to explore the ancient sites. And just down the road in a little cottage was the proverbial old witch. And she was initiating him into all of these strange ideas about the occult and things like that, how to protect yourself. But he was a really, really good diviner. And at the Merry Maidens, he got one of his long cords, and if you have it at a certain length, you'd find a certain artifact. So, for example, using his method, if you had 26.5 inches, or a harmonic of that, half, a quarter, an eighth, etc., you just have to walk along, and when it spins, you find water. And this was how he did it. He said, I can find the age of anything by using this method. So he was on one of the stones. It's called stone number 18, if you happen to go to the Merry Maidens, and he started dowsing around it. And the stone, he claims, started to rock back and forth, back and forth. The strange thing about some experiences of stone circles, they shift your reality a little bit. Like, because sometimes the energies are kind of so strong there. It's like when I take people around Avebury, which I do a lot. So, go onto my website, theaveburyexperience.co.uk, if you ever want to experience these type of things. And people do feel different things in different areas. That's the magical thing about these ancient sites. And they take you from the ordinary into the extraordinary. That is another thing about these sites. Well, I happened to be at Avebury, taking a blind person around, and then I've taken a deaf person around ancient sites. So their perception, their senses, are a little bit different than ours. And the deaf person at one point said they could hear the earth energies. And they said, where am I? And I was describing it. I said, you're right over the earth energies. You're over the living earth energies. The blind person's perception, suddenly they could see the earth energies. So I really do feel in different states of consciousnness, we see and feel different things. And this is certainly the case for when you enter anything like a fogu. And it is quite extraordinary. Now, on our Aleppo leys, you also had caves, yeah? You had caves in Turkey, for example. You had caves near Gibraltar. You have caves in the mountains of Tibet, for example. And in the Second World War, a lot of people didn't have anywhere to live. Their houses had been bombed, yeah, and they were homeless. So a lot of the people around the Essex and London area, they literally took for the caves, yeah, and they made them their homes for quite some time. And these are Chislehurst caves. And it was reported after World War II, and these people were staying there for quite some time, and they all started to report to the media the same story, which was collected by a master dowser called Guy Underwood, and I've inherited all of his unpublished manuscripts and surveys of ancient sites worldwide. And this is from the Guy Underwood archives. Well, the people started reporting, once you stayed in these places for more than 4 weeks, your body would start to self-heal. The people that went there in the wartime, you couldn't just go to the dentist if, your dentist had been bombed. It was a big thing, getting, medical attention. So they went in these caves, and after a while they said, my toothache has gone, my arthritis has gone. They were reporting these self-healing types of incidents, and this is what I think is about going into the fogu. It's about going in, getting self-healing, and 15 minutes, and coming back out again. So in this particular instance, there was something like 200 reported cases of self-healing occurring at Chislehurst Caves, yeah? So it made a lot of diviners want to find out what's going on. Why is it? Is it being inside the earth? Is it because of the earth energies? Is it because of water energies? What's going on? And why am I coming out feeling slightly different? And one thing which was one of my discoveries after looking into Guy Underwood's work, he always made the phrase aquastat, but never explained it. He said an aquastat was a dry riverbed, like a fissure system that goes through the earth. Well, after many years of water divining, I found out that really sacred yin water, wherever that flows, it gives off 12 energy lines. So you can, whenever you find these 12 energy lines, it's an aquastat, that healing deep water. And places like Chislehurst Cave, for example, they're all aligned on these aquastat places. And where you get two crossing points like that, if it's yang water, the rainwater that falls from the sky, and you happen to live above a crossing point of yang water, that is carcinogenic. Like I said, going back to the surveys done in Germany, you don't want to live above yang water. But this sort of water is self-healing. Yeah, it can heal us, yeah? Because Gaia, she's a bit like us. We have to have waste out of us. We have to go to the loo. We have to do these things. And Gaia is the same. She has to get the junk out of her system. So if we know where to live, if we know where to place schools, if we know where to place hospitals, for example, we can start living in harmony with Gaia. Because why should the rich just be doing this? Why should the geomancers that have been to Eton do this? You know, one thing about the Aleppo line, it had lots of mounds, didn't it, and pyramids on it. What's at Eton? A mound. What's at Marlborough College, where Kate Middleton went to? A mound. What's at St. Mary's Public School? A mound. You go to any public school and they're kind of buying into this system. So they all have mounds associated to them. And you can look that up for yourself. Look at the old Etonian little rite of the mound just outside their school. Probably burning an owl, aren't they, in their lunch break or something? Anyway, so this is the underground water that is very emittive, and that's what's under all of the mounds as well. And it was also noticed by Guy Underwood and other water diviners that if you leave an animal to go and give birth itself, then an animal will do, animals know what's good for them. We've kind of lost that. We're just remembering that. An animal will go to that spiral pattern or that habitation spiral I mentioned earlier and give birth there. And when Guy Underwood looked into this, he found not only did the birthing process ease, the offspring was more stronger, So now, if we get into the mindset where we can say, okay, we're going to have a new build for a hospital, let's put a particular part of the hospital above these energy patterns, And I had an architect from London, he was actually German, from London, this drop-dead, gorgeous black guy, coming around to talk about earth energies. Oh, I was all a quiver, I can tell you. But yeah, it was great. And so he was saying to me, do you know what? He said, I really, really buy into this sort of thing. And we're doing a documentary, and we want to tell a story. Will you be a part of that story? So I said, yeah, okay. And I was talking about earth energies, because just like the yin and yang water, you can get yin and yang earth energies. And they said, well, we're going to make this fantastic build. And what we're going to do, we're going to go to Iceland. And Iceland have put in a bid by all these architects to build a fantastic museum. And it was going to be a line to Cygnus using Andy Collins' work. It was going to be a glass building in the Fibonacci spiral over these earth energies and lit up at night like a swan. We thought we were in a good chance, didn't get anywhere. So that's not being built in Iceland. But then other architects started to get in contact with me, one from Italy, and saying, look, I'm going to be building this in the future. Can you show me about these new builds and things? So I really do feel that life is going to be changing for us, because the younger generation want these stories. They want to live in harmony with the earth. And I don't think it's too late to start. And so I'm really working closely with Italian architects to look into things. And I've done a playground in London above really relaxing earth energies. So the kids can wear off all of it and climb around a while, but then they chill out a little bit. And it's in a bit of a downtown London as well. So I feel once we introduce these things, we can really start understanding about ourselves. Well, I'm going to ask you if anyone's been here, and this gentleman over here is probably going to go off being there, Maria. But this is Monk's Mount in Illinois, America. No? No. Anyone else been there? No. Well, I happened to be there when I was growing up in America, and this is the largest mound in the world, And the American people are so dumbed down about their ancient sites. When they come over to go to Stonehenge with me, or down Stanton Drew or Glastonbury, and I'd say, have you ever been to Monk's Mount in Illinois? It's part of Cahokia. They look blankly. Have we got ancient sites in America? Yes, you've got the largest henge in the world. You've got a pentagram shape in a earthwork in Wisconsin. And interestingly, this pentagon earthwork is identical in shape to the military pentagon. And the designer called Bergstrom, that designed the pentagram military center for the Americans, lived next door to that ancient site. And he knew that the ancient indigenous Indian people said, we didn't build it, the kings of kings built it, but we reused it, and we reused it to initiate our warriors with blood. So he took that symbolism and made the military pentagon based on the ancient site. But here again, you have masses of lines going through Cahokia. It's beautiful. And nearby, you have Woodhenge, yeah, which is a fantastic reconstructed ancient site, all of cedar wood, yeah. And we have that close to Stonehenge, don't we? We have Woodhenge, which if we reconstructed it like that, it would look quite spectacular. Because if you reconstructed our Woodhenge, it becomes a labyrinth that you can walk around and feel the energies. So these are important sites in ancient America. When we have a look at a whole of a reconstruction of Cahokia, this was probably, in a way, not necessarily with large platforms and pyramids, but how we can envision how our ancient ancestors lived around places like Woodhenge, because you have Dorrington walls near Woodhenge is where they lived. So they'd create their sacred spaces, I believe, a lot of the time for healing and initiation. I think the long-skulled people found these places. There's been long-skulled people found in Cahokia as well. And they deemed the sacred points all around the earth and said, here we will have this build, here we'll have this build. And then they were all aligned with carrier ley lines, which I think were passing through a form of energy, and that the time of the eclipses, when everything goes down, was a time when the whole system reboots. And I also feel that it doesn't really matter about the theory of what happens at ancient sites. It doesn't really matter if you know what a ley is or you don't know what a ley is. Because if you go to these sites, then you do experience a change and a shift in your consciousness. And that is what I think is going to be taken away from us. It's happened at Silbury Hill. It's happened at Stonehenge. It's happened at Karnak. It's happened at the pyramids, and the list will go on and on and on. But before we know it, the only people going to the ancient sites will be the ones in the know. Because get this, Busty Taylor and myself were hanging around Stonehenge. Obviously, we got nothing better to do, but it was at the summer solstice, and it was getting dark. It was getting darker and darker, and everybody had gone home. Okay, so we're hanging around by the visitor centre, just watching and waiting to see when the staff went home to see, you know, what was happening. And give it an hour, give it another hour, and as the midnight hour was approaching, the black out cars started to arrive at Stonehenge. You know, the blacked out windows? And we were just watching them go through to the visitor centre, no pass-through security there, like that, and then they... 5 minutes. And then they just entered Stonehenge. And of course, so we tried to drive down the A303 to try and have a look in to see, you know, what's going on, but we couldn't see anything. It's a busy road. My point is, if we don't start interacting with these energy points known by our ancestors now, perhaps in the future we'll have a hard time. Another part of my work that I'm really passionate about is working with children at ancient sites. So every now and again, I'll give 3 days to a school, and I'll take children out, and I'll teach them about dowsing, and I'll teach them how to locate the earth energies. And they have an absolute blast there, because there's certain sites where the rods just spin out of control, and kids love it. And 25 years ago, I was at Stonehenge with a really young bunch of people. We were called Experience in England. It was part of their Canadian diploma to come out and experience the energies. And there was one young guy there. He was really into, oh, look, these rods move and stuff. Oh, isn't it exciting? And he got in contact with me 5 years ago. He's now an architect in Canada. He remembered that day. He's trying to integrate earth energies into his build. If we educate our children, if we're passionate about things, people start to listen. And my whole vision is, what's all it about, my ancestors? What is it all about, my Queen of Stonehenge, if we can't do anything and apply the ancient wisdom to a modern generation? So that's my passion, and that's my belief, and I think we can do that together. And that's the end of my talk.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Maria. That's really, really good. Really great indeed. Excellent.